digital clock on my dashboard glowed a sterile blue. 7:04 p.m. The decision, finally made, felt less like a resolution and more like a retreat. My weekend in Pittsburgh was over, a casualty of profound and mutual disappointment. The girl from Facebook, whose profile picture promised a certain kind of life, adventurous, witty, warm, had in person revealed herself to be a different constellation entirely. Our conversation, so fluid in text, had stuttered and died in the living room of her apartment, smothered by the weight of unmet expectations. The silence between us wasn't comfortable. It was diagnostic, revealing a fundamental mismatch I'd driven 6 hours to discover. My friend Mark's voice echoed in my head, a smug "I told you so" specter. Have you actually talked to her, man? Like really talked? You're driving into the unknown. He'd been right. I was now driving out of it, carrying only the sour aftertaste of wasted time and a profound desire for my own bed. The city lights of Pittsburgh dissolved in my rearview mirror, replaced by the deepening indigo of a Pennsylvania autumn evening. I cracked the window, letting the cold, pine-scented air scour the lingering awkwardness from the car. The hum of the tires on I-76 became a mantra of escape. I replayed the weekend's highlights, which were painfully few. A tense coffee, a walk through a park where we'd commented more on the dogs than each other. The growing, dreadful realization that clicking like on someone's travel photos did not translate to sharing a wavelength. My own fault, really. I'd built a person from pixels and carefully curated status updates. The real woman was a stranger, and the feeling was clearly mutual. By Saturday afternoon, we'd exhausted our reservoir of pre-written dialogue. The plan had been to stay through Sunday, maybe catch a movie, but the pretense became unbearable. I fabricated a work crisis, a looming deadline that required my immediate attention back in White Plains. Her relief was barely concealed. We exchanged a brittle, perfunctory hug at her door, and I was gone. The freedom of the open road was a potent salve. I pushed my sedan, a reliable but unremarkable Japanese import, to a steady 75. The setting sun was a wildfire in my west-facing mirrors, setting the autumn foliage ablaze in oranges and reds before it rapidly bled away into twilight. I fueled myself on greasy convenience store food and the bitter, familiar taste of regret. The dashboard's soft glow was my only companion. I calculated the journey home. With stops, I'd be pulling into my driveway by 1 a.m. I'd be a zombie at work on Monday, but that future fatigue was abstract, far preferable to the concrete discomfort of another minute in that stifling apartment. 3 hours into the drive, civilization had thinned to occasional clusters of light from distant farmhouses. The road was a dark river cutting through endless, rolling hills of shadow. My phone, mounted on the dash, chirped with a notification. A message from Mark. "You survive." I didn't reply, just passed a sign for a town called Rosecrans. I passed a beacon of modern normality. A Sunoco gas station, its fluorescent lights a brilliant island in the sea of night, glowing like a landed starship off to my left. I noted it absently, a waypoint in the darkness. A mile later, with the cruel irony the universe reserves for the already defeated, my gas gauge illuminated with a soft, accusatory orange. The low fuel warning. A hollow laugh escaped me. Of course. It never lit up as I was passing the brightly lit oasis, only ever when that oasis was a shrinking constellation in my rearview mirror. I was on one of those ruthlessly efficient divided highways, the kind with a wide, grassy median that might as well be a continent. No turning back. Not for miles. A spike of genuine anxiety pierced my self-pity. Running out of gas here in this void was an idiot's game. "Hey Siri," I said, my voice too loud in the quiet cabin. "Where's the next gas station?" The automated voice, cool and female, responded after a beat. It instructed me to continue for several miles, then turn onto US 15, where I'd find a station after approximately 20 to 30 minutes of driving. It was a detour, but it was a plan. I had maybe 40 miles of fuel left. It would be tight but possible. I checked the road. It was profoundly, unervingly empty. No taillights bleeding red into the distance ahead. No headlights glaring in my mirrors from behind. I was a solitary particle moving through a tube of pure black. For safety's sake, or so I told myself, I needed to glance at the phone's map to sear the turn details into my mind. I took my eyes off the road. I looked down at the luminous screen for 1 second, 2 at the absolute most, tracing the route with a glance. When I looked up, she was there. Materialized is the wrong word. She simply was, where a millisecond before there had been nothing but empty asphalt. A stark, upright shape in the dead center of my lane, caught in the harsh white reach of my headlights. My body reacted before my mind could process. A jolt of pure electricity shot down my spine. My foot stomped on the brake pedal with primitive force. The anti-lock system juddered violently, a mechanical death rattle, as the car screeched and slewed. The seatbelt locked, punching the air from my lungs. I wrestled the steering wheel, a scream trapped in my throat, certain I would hit her, certain I would feel the terrible thump. The car shuddered to a stop. Silence, broken only by the ragged sound of my own breathing and the engine's idle. The smell of scorched rubber seeped in through the vents. She was now 5 feet in front of my bumper, frozen in the glare. My initial shock ignited into a fury of adrenaline. What the hell is wrong with you? I wanted to yell. Are you trying to die? But the words died before they left my lips. The headlights rendered her in brutal, high-definition clarity, and what I saw extinguished my anger in an instant, replacing it with a cold, trickling dread. This was no casual pedestrian. This was a catastrophe on 2 legs. A young woman, maybe in her mid-20s. Her clothing, what was left of it, was torn and filthy. A flannel shirt hung open over a dirt-stained tank top, one sleeve nearly ripped off. Her jeans were dark with grime and what my brain, refusing to settle on the word, recognized as suspicious, rust-colored patches. Her feet were bare, pale against the blacktop. But it was her face, lifted to the lights, that held me. It was a mask of dirt, sweat, and terror. A deep, angry gash traced a line through her hairline above her right temple, and a rivulet of blood, black in the light, had dried a path down the side of her face and neck into her collar. Her eyes were wide, unblinking saucers of pure animal panic, reflecting my headlights back at me like an animal caught on a highway. She didn't move for a heartbeat. Then life surged back into her. She stumbled forward, not away from the car, but towards it, a lurching, pained gait. She limped around the hood, her bare feet slapping softly on the pavement, and grabbed the handle of my passenger door. It was locked. She pulled once, a dull, metallic clunk. She pulled again, harder, her body straining. Then she began to beat on the window, not with open palms, but with the bony sides of her fists. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet night. Her voice came through the glass, distorted but piercing, a raw scrape of sound that was more force than tone. "Open the door! Open the door!" She screamed it, but it broke into a sob on the last word. "Please! I'm begging you, please!" My training, the modern, urban paranoia drilled into every city dweller, kicked in. This is a trap. This is how they get you. Pretty bait, desperate act. Then the others swarm. My head snapped around, my eyes straining to pierce the wall of darkness beyond my headlights. Were there shapes moving in the tree line? Was there a vehicle parked on the shoulder I hadn't seen? I saw nothing but an infinite, consuming black. The empty road, once a comfort, now felt like a staged set for an ambush. I looked back at her. Her face was pressed close to the glass now. Up close, the wound was worse. I could see the raw, clotted meat of it. I could see the tracks of tears through the grime on her cheeks. And her eyes, they held a depth of terror that no actor could fake. It was a foundational, soul-deep fear that bypassed my logic and spoke directly to a more primal instinct. The sight of the blood, the sound of her voice, a genuine, soul-rending plea. It overrode the cautious, cynical script in my head. With a click that sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence, I hit the master unlock switch. The door was wrenched open before the mechanism had fully disengaged. She practically fell into the passenger seat, a tangle of limbs and torn fabric, immediately scrambling to pull the door shut behind her. It slammed with a heavy, final thud, sealing us together in the soft-lit cabin. The interior light faded, plunging us back into the dashboard's glow. She was breathing in frantic, ragged gasps, hugging herself, her whole body vibrating with tension. She smelled of sweat, earth, and the faint, metallic tang of blood. "Go!" she whispered, then louder, her voice cracking. "Go! Drive! Now! Faster!" She twisted in her seat to look out the back window, her hands braced on the dashboard. "They're going to catch us. They're coming." I didn't need to be told twice. I shoved the gearshift into drive and stomped on the accelerator. The tires chirped in protest before grabbing asphalt, and we surged forward. I pushed the speedometer to 80, then 90, the engine whining in protest. The dark highway unfurled before us, a tunnel we were desperate to exit. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I kept waiting for headlights to blossom in my rearview, for the pursuit to begin. After several miles of this frantic, silent sprint, with no signs of life behind us, the initial shockwave of adrenaline began to recede, leaving my hands trembling on the wheel. I eased off the gas, letting the speed bleed down to a still illegal 70. We needed to be fast, but wrapping ourselves around a tree would solve nothing. The moment the car slowed, she erupted. "Why are you slowing down?" she shrieked, turning wild eyes on me. "Go faster. What are you doing?" "They're following me." Her voice was laced with a hysteria that was contagious. "There's no one back there," I said, forcing a calm into my voice I didn't feel. My own nerves were frayed wire. Not a single light. And if we go much faster and a cop sees us, we're pulled over and done. We can't help anyone from the back of a squad car. She stared at me as if I were speaking an alien language. Then she shook her head violently, the movement causing her to wince in pain and touch her head wound. "You don't get it," she said, her voice dropping to a fierce, terrified whisper. "We want the police. We need them. If those men catch me—" She swallowed hard, her gaze locking onto mine with terrifying intensity. "They'll kill you too, just for being here. They'll kill you to get me back." A chill, colder than the night air outside, settled in the pit of my stomach. The statement was so matter-of-fact, so devoid of theatrical flourish, that it carried the weight of absolute truth. It was in that moment, as she pushed her tangled hair back from her face with a shaking hand, that I saw it. The light from the dashboard glinted dully on metal encircling her left wrist. A handcuff. One bracelet was locked snugly around her slender bone. The other half hung open, swinging free, the connecting chain snapped or, more likely, pried apart. The metal was scratched and gouged, a testament to brutal force. The sight of it was a key turning in a lock, opening a door to a reality I did not want to enter. This wasn't a domestic dispute, a bad drug deal, or a mental health crisis. Handcuffs meant captivity. They meant deliberation. This woman hadn't just been in a fight. She'd been taken. The last vestiges of my doubt vanished, replaced by a new, more profound fear. She wasn't running from the law. She was running to it, from something infinitely worse. "Okay," I said, the word coming out hoarse. I pressed the accelerator again, bringing us back up to 80. My eyes became fixated on the rearview mirror, scanning the strip of black for the pinprick of light that would confirm her fears. Every minute or so, my gaze would involuntarily drop to the fuel gauge. The needle was buried deep, emphatically in the red. A new layer of panic, practical and immediate, began to seep into the existential one. We were running, but we were running on fumes. The interior of the car had become a strange, pressurized capsule. The scent of her fear, sour, sharp, mixed with the synthetic pine from my little air freshener, creating a nauseating cocktail. Her breathing had settled from frantic gasps into shallow, hitched tremors. She sat curled into herself, knees drawn up to her chest on the seat, her arms wrapped tightly around her shins. She kept her face turned toward the side window, but I could tell she wasn't seeing the passing darkness. She was staring inward at memories I couldn't fathom. I had to say something. The silence was a living thing, thick with unsaid horrors. "My name's Ben," I offered, the statement absurd in its normalcy. She didn't respond for a long moment. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said, "Chloe," a name. It made her real in a way her physical presence hadn't. She wasn't just the girl anymore. She was Chloe, who had been someone before this night. "Chloe," I repeated, trying to imbue the word with some steadiness. "We're going to be okay. We're getting to that gas station and we're calling the police. They'll meet us there." I was talking as much to reassure myself as her. She shook her head minutely, a gesture of hopelessness. "You don't know them." Her voice was a monotone, drained. "They don't give up." "Who are they, Chloe?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. "I don't know," she whispered, and it sounded like the truest thing she'd said yet. "I don't know their names. They just took me." She uncurled slightly, extending her left arm to stare at the dangling handcuff as if it were a venomous snake attached to her. From a parking lot, behind the grocery store where I worked. It was Tuesday night. She fell silent, the effort of recounting seeming to exhaust her. Tuesday. Today was Saturday. My mind did the awful math. For days. She'd been missing and presumably in their custody. For 4 days. The implications of that time span, coupled with her current state, opened up a chasm of ugly possibilities in my imagination. I focused on the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The gas gauge seemed to pulse with a malevolent light. We couldn't outrun anyone on prayers. I took a deep breath. "Chloe, I need to tell you something. It's not good." She turned her head slowly to look at me, her eyes wary. "My gas tank. It's almost empty. The light came on right before I saw you. We have to stop at this next station. It's not an option. We'll run out before we get anywhere else." The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. Her body uncoiled. "What?" she shrieked, the word tearing from her throat. "No, you can't stop. You can't." She began to beat her fists against her own thighs, a frantic, helpless motion. "Oh God, no, 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 no. This can't be happening." The panic was back, tenfold, edged with a fury born of utter despair. "You're supposed to help me. You have to keep going. I can't drive on air." I shot back, my own fear sharpening my voice. "If we run out on this highway, we're sitting ducks. A gas station is a public place. There will be lights, cameras, maybe other people. It's safer than the middle of nowhere." The logic felt flimsy even as I said it, but it was the only logic we had. She dissolved into a stream of choked sobs and profanity, rocking back and forth. I felt a surge of helpless frustration. We were a team of 2, and one of us was shattered beyond the ability to strategize. I had to take control. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, adopting a tone of forced authority. "We are going to that gas station, but you are going to call 911 right now. You tell them exactly where we're going, the station off US 15. You tell them to send every car they have to meet us there. You make sure they understand it's a kidnapping, that you've escaped, and that the perpetrators are armed and pursuing. Do you understand?" She stared at me, tears cutting fresh paths through the grime on her cheeks. She gave a tiny, shuddering nod. "My phone," I said, gesturing to it still mounted on the dash. "Use it. Do it now." With trembling, filthy hands, she carefully detached the phone. The glow of the screen illuminated her face from below, making her look gaunt, ghostly. She fumbled with the passcode. I told her it and pulled up the keypad. Her finger hovered over the numbers for a second before she pressed 911 and put the phone to her ear. I listened with half my mind, the other half navigating the increasingly winding road as we turned onto US 15. The voice of the 911 dispatcher was a tinny, professional squawk I could just make out. 911, what's your emergency? A female voice, calm. Chloe took a hitching breath. My name is Chloe. I've been kidnapped. I escaped. I'm in a car with a man who picked me up. We're going to the gas station on US 15, near the turnoff for... She looked at me, lost. Miller's Bend, I supplied quietly, having seen the sign. Miller's Bend, she repeated into the phone. Please send police. They're after me. They had me handcuffed. Her voice broke. Please hurry. The dispatcher's questions were audible fragments. Can you describe the suspects? Are you injured? Where were you held? Chloe's answers were fragmented, bursting forth in pained clusters. I don't know, 3 men, maybe more. I didn't see all their faces. Yes, my head. They took me to a place in the woods, a basement, I think. It was cold. They chained me to a pipe. A sob escaped her. I pulled it out of the wall. I just pulled and pulled until it broke. I felt a surge of awe at the raw, desperate strength that must have required. The dispatcher asked another question. Chloe's face contorted. She curled in on herself again. The phone pressed so hard to her ear it must have hurt. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But in the quiet car, I heard every devastating word. They kept me there for days. She couldn't say it. She didn't have to. The horror was in the silence that followed, in the way her whole body seemed to shrink. She mumbled something else, so low I only caught the edge of it. Made me? They filmed? Then louder, a plea. Just please come. Please. We'll be at the gas station. She gave the dispatcher my name and a crude description of my car before ending the call. She held the phone limply in her lap, as if it weighed 100 pounds. The air in the car was now charged with a new, more intimate kind of dread. The abstract bad men had become concrete monsters, authors of specific, unimaginable cruelties. A burning anger began to mix with my fear, a clean, hot flame. My foot grew heavier on the pedal. The speedometer crept past 85. I wanted to put 1,000 miles between her and that place in the woods. We drove in a heavy, shared silence for another 10 minutes. Then, the promised lights appeared in the distance, a cluster of white and yellow punching a hole in the rural darkness. The gas station. As we drew closer, the details resolved. A standard 4-pump layout under a bright canopy, attached to a small, lit convenience store with large windows. A single car, an older pickup truck, was parked at one of the pumps. Otherwise, the lot was empty. No flashing red and blue lights. No police cruisers. Where are they? Chloe breathed, her voice thin with disbelief. She pressed her face against the passenger window, scanning the lot. She said they'd be here. Where are they? Maybe they're just around the corner, I said, the hope sounding hollow. Or coming from farther out. It's a rural area. I pulled into the lot, but instead of heading for the pumps, I parked facing the entire station. My car pointed toward the entrance. It gave us a panoramic view. I kept the engine running. We wait, right here. They'll come. The minutes ticked by. Each second was an eternity. Chloe was a live wire beside me, her eyes darting from the store to the road to the dark fields beyond the station's perimeter lights. Every set of headlights that appeared on the distant highway made her flinch and hold her breath until it passed by. The pickup truck finished fueling. A burly man in a plaid jacket went inside, came out, got in his truck, and drove away. We were alone again. The tension in the car was becoming unbearable, a pressure cooker nearing its limit. Then, a new set of headlights turned off the highway, not passing by, but slowing for the station. A sedan. It pulled in and stopped at a pump on the opposite side of the canopy from us. Chloe went rigid. "Who's that?" she whispered, her voice taut. "Just someone getting gas," I said, trying to sound sure. But she was beyond reassurance. As the driver's door opened and a man in jeans and a hoodie got out, she let out a small, strangled sound. No, it could be them. It could be one of them. Her breathing accelerated into hyperventilation. They found us. They tracked us here. "Chloe, it's just a guy." "Screw this," she screamed, the sound exploding in the confined space. In one violent, fluid motion, she threw open the passenger door, the dome light blaring on, and launched herself out into the night. "Wait," I yelled, fumbling for my own seatbelt. "Chloe, stop." She didn't even look back. She hit the ground running, her bare feet slapping on the asphalt, and cut diagonally across the lot behind the station. She was heading for a thick, black line of trees that marked the beginning of a wooded area. The half-handcuff flashed once in the station's lights as her arm pumped. In seconds, she was swallowed by the darkness between the tree trunks, gone as completely as if she'd never been there. I sat there, stunned, my heart hammering against my ribs. My yell had attracted the attention of the man at the pump. He was staring at me, his gas nozzle in hand, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. I couldn't chase her. I'd never find her in those woods in the dark, and abandoning the car here, the only link to help was insanity. I took a deep, shuddering breath, killed the engine, and got out. The night air was bitingly cold. I held up a hand toward the man in a everything's okay gesture that felt like a grotesque lie. "It's under control," I called out, my voice strangely calm. "The police are on the way." The man stared at me for another second, then gave a slow, dubious nod and turned back to his pump, deciding wisely not to get involved. What could I do? My passenger had fled into the wilderness. My role now was to hold the fort, to be the point of contact. And I desperately needed gas. I got back in, started the car, and drove the short distance to an empty pump. The routine act of unscrewing the gas cap, inserting the nozzle, and selecting the grade felt surreal, a bizarre slice of normalcy in a nightmare. The numbers on the display began to tick upward. As I stood there, the smell of gasoline thick in the air, the man from the pickup finished, gave me one last wary glance, got in his truck, and drove off. I was alone under the buzzing fluorescent lights. The silence was immense. My mind raced. She's out there, hurt, barefoot, terrified. The cops are coming. What do I tell them? I was still holding the gas nozzle when a new set of headlights washed over the lot. A car. A dark, late-model four-door sedan. It didn't have the sleek, silent menace of a movie villain's car. It was clean, respectable, the kind a mid-level manager might drive. It didn't pull up to a pump. It rolled slowly to a stop near the store entrance, idle lights on. 3 doors opened almost simultaneously. 3 men got out. They were not monsters. They were, in fact, profoundly ordinary. All were Caucasian, dressed in casual but neat attire. Khakis, button-down shirts under practical jackets. They looked like they could be insurance adjusters, small business owners, or off-duty realtors. The oldest, who appeared to be in his early 50s with a receding hairline and a solid build, took the lead. The other 2, perhaps in their 40s, flanked him slightly. They didn't stretch or head for the store. They stood for a moment, their heads on swivels, methodically scanning the entire gas station property. Their gaze swept over the store windows, the dark edges of the lot, the tree line, and then landed on me, the only person present. My blood turned to ice slurry in my veins. Every instinct screamed. This was them. These were the men from the woods. They looked so normal. That was the most terrifying part. The older man said something to his companions, and then he began walking toward me. His gait was unhurried, confident. The other 2 hung back but began to move as well, drifting apart, their own eyes still scanning. One angled toward the storefront. The other began a slow, casual amble that brought him closer to my car. I forced myself to look down at the gas pump, as if fascinated by the rising numbers. The click of dress shoes on asphalt grew nearer, then stopped a polite distance away. "Evening," the man said. His voice was neutral, Middle American, with no discernible accent. Pleasant, even. I looked up, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second before looking past his shoulder. A gesture I hoped read as casual disinterest rather than abject terror. "Evening," I managed, my voice thankfully steady. "You haven't seen a little lady wandering around here, have you?" he asked. The question was delivered with a slight, almost apologetic smile, as if he were inquiring about a lost dog. Young thing, might be a bit disheveled? The moment of truth. I am, and have always been, a catastrophically bad liar. My face burns, my words trip. A flat denial would be a red flag to a man like this. So I reached for the weapon of a half-truth, wrapped in a persona I thought he might buy, an annoyed, slightly scared everyman. I let out a short, exasperated breath and shook my head. Yeah, actually, I did. Nearly ran the crazy bitch over back on the main highway. I injected a note of aggrieved irritation into my tone. Just standing right in the middle of the lane, waving her arms like a lunatic. Looked like she'd been through a wood chipper. Scared the hell out of me. I chanced a glance at his face. His expression hadn't changed, but his eyes were fixed on me, assessing. I continued building the character. I keep my doors locked, you know? Not taking any chances. Might sound cold, but around here? Could be a setup. Drove right around her and got the hell out of there. Called 911 just to report a hazard. Didn't want to be responsible for some psycho becoming a hood ornament. I finally looked directly at him, injecting what I hoped was a spark of conspiratorial curiosity. Why? She escaped from some asylum or something. You guys cops. The three of them, almost in unison, let out a low, soft chuckle. It wasn't a warm sound. It was the sound of men sharing a private, grim joke. The older man's smile widened a fraction. Or something, he said mildly. My performance hadn't convinced him. It had merely amused him. While he held my attention, I was acutely aware of his companions moving. The one who had angled toward the store was now peering in the large windows. The other had closed the distance to my car and was now, with a shameless casualness, leaning slightly to look through the passenger side window. His hands cupped around his eyes to block the reflection. He was inspecting the interior. A fresh, electric terror shot through me. Did she leave anything? A strand of hair on the headrest? A drop of blood on the seat? A scrap of torn fabric caught in the seatbelt? My mind flashed to my phone. Had I left it on the dash? My hand instinctively patted my jacket pocket. The solid rectangle was there. Thank God. The man looking into my car was thorough. He scanned the floor, the seats, the dash. The older man watched me, his pleasant mask still in place, waiting for my reaction to this blatant invasion. I decided aggression of the indignant, normal person variety was my only play. I turned my body toward the guy at my window, my posture stiffening. Hey! I said, my voice louder, edged with annoyance. You mind? What are you looking for in there? The man at the window straightened up slowly. He turned and looked at me. He wasn't smiling. His face was blank, impassive. He didn't apologize, didn't look away. He just stared. Then, after a beat that lasted a small eternity, the corners of his mouth twitched upward into something that was not a smile but a baring of teeth. He took a slow, deliberate step backward. The older man chuckled again, a dry sound. Don't mind my friend there, he said, his tone almost avuncular. He's just a naturally curious soul. The phrase was benign, but the way he said it, slow, deliberate, made my skin prickle. It was a threat disguised as an explanation. He looked from me to his two companions. A silent communication passed between them, a slight nod from the one who had been at the store. They'd seen nothing of interest. The older man turned his benign smile back to me. Well, sorry to bother you. You have a safe trip now. With that, the three of them turned as one and walked back toward their sedan. Not hurrying, not looking back. They got in. The engine purred to life. The car executed a slow, neat turn and pulled out onto the highway, its taillights shrinking into two red pinpricks before vanishing into the dark. I stood there, gripping the gas nozzle, my legs suddenly weak. The pump clicked off, full. I had never been so close to pure, predatory evil, and it had worn the face of a bland, middle-aged man in a button-down shirt. And it had been curious about me. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely screw the gas cap back on. The routine click-click-click of the mechanism was an absurdly loud sound in the ringing silence they'd left behind. I got back into the driver's seat, the act feeling like a retreat into a fragile shell. I needed to pay. I needed to be inside the store, under lights, near another human being, even if it was just a bored night clerk. The bell above the door jingled with shocking cheerfulness as I entered. The store was bright, warm, and smelled of stale coffee and artificial cherry from the air freshener plugged in near the register. A young clerk with headphones on glanced up from his phone, gave me a non-committal nod, and looked back down. Normalcy. It was a glass pane. I was on the wrong side of looking in. I walked to the counter, my movements feeling stiff and robotic. I pulled out my wallet. "Pump 4? I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. The clerk tapped his screen, told me the total. I swiped my card, my mind 1,000 miles away, replaying the interaction in the lot. The older man's calm voice, the second man's invasive, silent inspection. The phrase, "a curious soul." It echoed. I signed the receipt with a scribble. Instead of leaving, I found myself wandering the narrow aisles. I wasn't shopping. I was using the store's geography as a shield, its windows as viewports. I picked up a bag of chips, put it back, selected a protein bar, studied its nutritional information without reading a word. All the while, my eyes were fixed on the parking lot through the large plate glass windows. The three men had driven off, but the psychic residue of their presence hung over the place like a poison gas. I watched the empty road. "They're not gone," a voice in my head insisted. "They're circling. They're waiting." The idea Chloe had planted, a tracking device, now seemed less like paranoid sci-fi and more like the only logical explanation. How else could they have arrived at this specific, remote station so soon after she'd called 911 from my phone? They hadn't been following my car. They'd been following her. The broken handcuff. Could it have contained a chip? It was horrifyingly plausible. The clerk finally took his headphones off halfway, sensing my odd behavior. "You all right, man?" he asked, not unkindly. That broke the spell. I walked back to the counter, abandoning my pretense of browsing. "Yeah. Long night." I gestured vaguely toward the lot. "Had a really strange thing happen. Picked up a hitchhiker back on 76. A girl. She was in bad shape. Said she'd been kidnapped." The clerk's eyebrows shot up. He was maybe 20, with acne scars and a wispy goatee. This was clearly the most excitement his shift had seen. "Seriously? Where is she?" "She freaked out and ran off into those woods," I said, pointing toward the dark tree line. "Right before those three guys showed up in the sedan. They were asking about her." The clerk's eyes widened further. "No shit? They looked like cops." "They said they weren't. Didn't feel like it either." I didn't elaborate on the feeling. It was too complex, too visceral. "I called the police. They should be here any minute." As if on cue, the distinctive flash of red and blue lights strobed through the windows, painting the shelves in alternating pulses. Two county sheriff's cruisers pulled into the lot, their headlights cutting beams through the night. A wave of profound, knee-weakening relief washed over me. Authority, safety, procedure. "Speak of the devil," the clerk muttered, impressed. I walked outside to meet them. Two deputies got out of the first car, a male and a female, their uniforms crisp, their faces set in professional, neutral expressions. A third deputy emerged from the second cruiser. The sight of their badges, their radios, their utility belts laden with tools of order, was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I launched into my story before they could even ask. The words tumbled out of me in a torrent. The failed date, the drive, the figure in the road, her injuries, the handcuff, her story of kidnapping and escape, the frantic drive here, her panic, her flight into the woods. Then the arrival of the three men. I described them in detail, their faces, their clothes, their car. I emphasized the older man's question, the second man's inspection of my vehicle, the leader's creepy comment. "They knew she'd been here," I said, my voice rising. "They came right to this spot. It was like they had a homing beacon on her. That handcuff, you gotta check for a tracker or something." The female deputy, Officer Reyes according to her name tag, listened intently, taking notes on a small pad. Her partner, a burly man named Dawes, asked clarifying questions, his tone calm and methodical. They didn't seem skeptical, just thorough. When I finished, Officer Reyes looked toward the dark woods. "And you say she ran in there?" "Yes, barefoot. Maybe 20 minutes before you arrived." Dawes got on his radio, requesting additional units for a search of the perimeter. Reyes turned back to me. "You did the right thing calling it in, getting us involved. She said it with a firm sincerity. Even if it was stressful, even traumatic, you've given us a location, descriptions, a potential crime scene back in those woods. You've put us one step closer to these individuals. Her words were a balm. They framed my night of terror as a positive act, a civic duty fulfilled. Dawes added, "And these guys showing up here, getting their faces and plates on the station's cameras?" He gestured to the small security cameras under the canopy. "If they're who you think they are, that's a major mistake. You led them right to a source of evidence. You should feel good about that." I didn't feel good, but I felt a sliver of pride cutting through the residual fear. They took my full statement, my contact information, and a description of Chloe. They assured me they'd search the woods and put out a bolo for the sedan. There was nothing more for me to do. The baton had been passed. The drive home to White Plains was the longest 3 hours of my life. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a deep, hollow exhaustion and a mind that wouldn't stop racing. I was alone with my thoughts, and they were dark, recursive things. I replayed every second, every choice. Should I have locked the doors and driven away? Should I have tackled Chloe to stop her from running? Had my performance with the 3 men been convincing enough, or had they seen through me and were even now hunting her, and by extension me, with a colder fury? Mostly I thought of Chloe. Chloe, who worked at a grocery store. Chloe, who had been taken on a Tuesday night. Chloe, who had found the superhuman strength to rip a pipe from a wall. Was she still running, cold and bleeding, through that unforgiving Pennsylvania forest? Had she found a road, flagged down a different car, one with a driver who didn't have an empty gas tank? Or had the woods swallowed her whole? 2 days later, back in the mundane reality of my apartment, my phone rang with an unknown number with a Pennsylvania area code. It was Detective Varney from the county sheriff's office. His voice was gravelly, tired. He asked me to go over the story again, probing for details I might have forgotten, the exact words the men used, the model of the sedan, the direction Chloe had run. When I was done, I asked the question that had been burning in my chest. "Did you find her, Chloe?" Pause on the line. A rustle of papers. "No, sir, we have not," Detective Varney said, his tone flat, professional. "We conducted an extensive search of the wooded area behind that station and the surrounding county roads. No sign of her. We did locate the vehicle the 3 men were driving. It was registered to a rental agency out of Harrisburg. Rented with a stolen ID. A dead end." My heart sank. "And the men? From the cameras? The footage is being analyzed. The license plate was obscured. It's an active investigation." The bureaucratic phrase felt like a door closing. He thanked me for my cooperation, said he'd be in touch if anything new developed, and hung up. That was the last I ever heard from anyone in Pennsylvania about Chloe. Time passed. Life moved on. I went back to work, went on other, more cautious dates, paid my bills. But the experience left a stain on my perception of the world. The night was no longer just dark. It was populated with possibilities like those 3 ordinary-looking men. Gas stations, especially lonely ones, took on an eerie charge. I think about her often. Some days, when the sun is bright and life feels orderly, I construct an elaborate fantasy for Chloe. In it, she emerged from those woods miles away, was found by a kind family, was taken to a hospital where her physical wounds healed. She entered a witness protection program, testified against a human trafficking ring that was busted wide open because of the clues I provided and the gas station footage. She moved to a small town out west, changed her name, fell in love with a teacher or a carpenter, had children. She gardens. She laughs. The handcuff is a melted-down lump of metal in an evidence locker, and the memory of those days is a locked room in her mind she rarely visits. On these days, I feel a quiet, profound satisfaction. I helped. She made it. But other days, darker days, a different ending plays on a loop. The feeling is a cold, hard knot in my stomach, a certainty that feels like remembered truth. In this version, the tracker in the handcuff worked flawlessly. The 3 men didn't drive away. They parked down a rural lane and came back on foot, moving silently through the trees they knew so well. They found her, cold and exhausted, huddled under a fallen log. There was no struggle this time. They were efficient. The oldest man, the one with the pleasant voice, maybe looked at her with something like regret before giving the order. They silenced her, the curious soul making sure the job was done right. They buried her in a shallow grave in those same woods, a place so vast it would never give up its secret. On these days, the world feels thin and malevolent, and I feel the weight of having been so close to a terrible, hidden machinery that grinds people up and leaves no trace. I will never know which ending is true. That is the lingering horror of it. Not the jump scare on the road, but the endless, silent question mark hanging in the air years later. All I have is the memory of her face in my headlights, her voice begging through the glass, and the chilling, mundane smiles of the men who were looking for her. The road that night held more than shadows. It held a glimpse into an abyss where ordinary rules dissolve, and I have been forever unable to look away. The memory of that Pennsylvania night had faded to a persistent, low-grade hum of anxiety, a lesson learned about the darkness that exists just off the well-lit road. It was a lesson I carried with me 2 years later, across an ocean, when my family and I embarked on what was supposed to be a dream vacation. My name is James. My wife, Sarah, has an eye for beauty and a knack for finding incredible deals. She discovered the villa in a glossy travel brochure, a centuries-old stone farmhouse nestled in the hills above the Tuscan village of Lucalina. The photographs showed sun-drenched terraces overlooking vineyards, a private pool, rustic yet elegant interiors. The price, compared to the cramped coastal apartments, was shockingly low. "It's because it's authentic," Sarah declared, her eyes shining with the prospect of 2 weeks of Italian rustic charm. Our son, Tom, was 4 years old, a bundle of endless energy and wonder. The idea of him running through olive groves, of family meals under a pergola, was irresistible. We booked it immediately. The journey from New York to Pisa was a marathon of cramped seats, in-flight cartoons, and parental patience. Tom, thrilled by his first transatlantic flight for the first hour, spent the remaining 6 in a state of restless discontent. Our salvation was gelato. In the Pisa airport, we bought him a cone of fragola, and the magic of Italian sugar worked instantly. A sticky, smiling boy was strapped into our rented Fiat Panda, and we began the long drive into the heart of Tuscany. Sarah navigated from the passenger seat, her phrasebook in her lap. We drove as the afternoon sun softened into a golden evening, painting the rolling hills in breathtaking shades of amber and green. We passed ancient walled towns perched on hilltops like stone crowns. It was everything we'd hoped for. But as the sky deepened to indigo and then to a velvety black, the picturesque countryside began to feel remote, isolating. The charming, winding roads became confusing labyrinths in the dark. Tom, lulled by the motion and the spectacle of a billion stars unveiled in the unpolluted sky, finally fell asleep in his car seat. "Are we close?" Sarah asked, her voice weary. She'd been struggling to stay awake, the jet lag claiming her. "According to this, yes," I said, peering at the map illuminated by the dashboard light. The villa's instructions were a handwritten scrawl from the owner, vague on details. Next right, then supposedly a steep climb for a few kilometers. We came to a crossroads marked by a lone, leaning crucifix. No street signs. I stopped the car. The silence was absolute, broken only by the tick of the cooling engine. The world was reduced to the cone of our headlights and the breathtaking canopy of stars above. I consulted the map again, turned it, matched the squiggly lines to the road we'd come from. "This way," I said, pointing to the left-hand fork, a narrow lane that disappeared into a tunnel of overhanging cypress trees. I put the little Fiat in gear and started up the incline. The road was steep, winding tightly. The headlights illuminated a stone wall on one side, a sheer drop on the other. We crawled upward in second gear. The slope was so acute that I couldn't see the crest until we were almost upon it. I inched forward, my foot hovering over the brake, mindful of a potential collision with a parked vehicle or livestock around the blind corner. As the nose of the car crested the hill, the headlights swept over the scene ahead, and a man erupted from the bushes to our right. He was middle-aged, dressed in dark, nondescript work clothes. His face was set in a grim mask of intense concentration. And in his hands, leveled directly at my windshield, was a long, double-barreled shotgun. Time didn't slow. It shattered. Sarah's scream was a raw, physical thing in the small car. Tom woke with a confused wail. My own brain short-circuited. Every thought was overwritten by a single, primal command. Reverse. My hand fumbled for the gearshift. My eyes locked on the twin black holes of the shotgun barrels. This was it. We were going to die on a hillside in Italy, victims of a robbery or some incomprehensible rural feud. Then, movement to the left. A second man, younger, burst from the foliage. He didn't have a weapon. Instead, he lunged at the first man, grabbing the barrels of the shotgun and wrenching them upward, shouting "no?" in Italian, a sharp, guttural no. The first man resisted for a split second, his eyes still on us, before his focus broke. He looked at his companion, then back at our terrified faces pressed against the glass. A foreign family, a crying child. Horror, realization, and profound apology flooded his features. The grim mask melted away into stunned embarrassment. He lowered the shotgun, letting his companion guide it toward the ground. The second man, now clearly in charge, approached my window. He was breathing heavily, offering a wide, nervous smile that didn't reach his eyes. He tapped on the glass. I was paralyzed. Sarah was sobbing quietly, trying to comfort Tom. With a trembling hand, I rolled down the window a bare 2 inches. Mi dispiace, signore, he said, the words rushing out. I'm sorry, sir. My pitiful Italian fled. All I could manage was, "Parla inglese? Do you speak English?" No, he said, shaking his head with that melodic Italian emphasis. No English. Sarah, her voice quivering with fear and a mother's fierceness, leaned over from the passenger seat. Are you police? Polizia. The man's face lit up with recognition. Si, polizia, he said, nodding vigorously. He made a shooing motion with his hands. Avanti. Go on. We didn't need to be told twice. Grazie. I stammered, rolling up the window. I put the car in gear and eased forward, driving past the 2 men. The first one wouldn't meet my eyes, staring at the ground in shame. The second gave us a final, tense wave. In the back, Tom was crying, "Mommy, Daddy? Who were those men? Why did he have that big gun?" Sarah, her voice miraculously steadying, turned to him. "It's okay, sweetheart. They were police. They were being very friendly. They're letting us go to our holiday house. It's all okay." She believed it in that moment or needed Tom to believe it. Her performance was flawless. I drove, my hands locked on the wheel, following the signs for the villa. My mind was a riot of conflicting signals. Police? No uniforms. That shotgun was an ancient, weathered thing, not a modern police firearm. No badges shown. No demand for identification. And the sheer, unprofessional terror on the first man's face when he realized his mistake. That wasn't the reaction of a trained officer who'd almost blown away a civilian. That was the reaction of someone who'd almost made a catastrophic, unauthorized error. 15 minutes later, we found the villa. It was, as promised, stunning. The stone walls glowed under exterior lights, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. The reality was better than the brochure. We carried a sleepy Tom inside, got him settled in his rustic, wooden-bedded room. The normalcy of unpacking, of claiming spaces, acted as a temporary salve. But once Tom was asleep and Sarah and I were alone in our bedroom with a bottle of local wine, the facade crumbled. "They weren't police," I said quietly, the words dropping into the peaceful room like stones. She looked at me, her face pale. "What do you mean?" I laid out my case. No uniforms. That gun was a museum piece. They didn't ask for our papers, didn't radio it in. And the look on that first guy's face. Sarah, he was there to shoot someone. He had a specific target, and he thought it was us coming over that hill. The other guy stopped him because he recognized we were the wrong people. The color drained from her face completely. "Then who?" "The mafia," I said, The word felt absurd, dramatic, like something from a movie. But in the context of rural Italy, in the dark, on a remote hillside, it was the only answer that fit. Camorra, Ndrangheta, something local. They were waiting for someone. A rival, an informant, someone who was supposed to come up that road at that time. We just happened to have the same make and color of car, or we hit the crest at the exact wrong moment. The vacation paradise now felt like a gilded cage. We were surrounded by breathtaking beauty that masked a layer of violence we had accidentally scratched. Sarah wanted to call the police immediately. I argued against it. My experience on the Pennsylvania highway had taught me a blunt lesson about the wisdom of inserting oneself into dangerous situations. If they are mafia and we go to the real police, we become a problem. We become witnesses. Right now, we're a mistake, an embarrassment. If we report it, we become a threat. Our names, this villa's location, get written down in a report. I don't want that kind of attention for the next 2 weeks. It was a grim calculation born of fear. We chose, as countless Italians had done for generations, the tradition of omerta. Silence. We decided to forget, to pretend it was a strange encounter with overzealous carabinieri on a training exercise. We would enjoy our holiday. The next day, we drove down to Lucalina. It was a postcard-perfect village. A central piazza with a fountain, cobbled streets, elderly men playing cards outside a cafe. We found a small bar that served espresso and pastries. While Sarah and Tom played a battered foosball table, I sat at the bar. The bartender, a jovial man in his 30s, surprised me by speaking fluent, lightly accented English. We chatted about the weather, the sights. He recommended a family-run trattoria for dinner. Felt normal, wonderful. Then, the television above the bar, which had been murmuring in the background, caught the attention of a group of old men drinking espresso. They gestured, speaking rapidly. The bartender turned up the volume. A news anchor was speaking with grave seriousness over footage of a rural road, a road that looked familiar. I felt a cold trickle down my spine. "What is it?" I asked the bartender. He listened for a moment, his smile fading. "A murder," he said quietly, turning back to me. "Not far from here. A businessman. From Siena. Terrible." He asked the old men a question in rapid Italian. They replied, gesturing emphatically. The bartender's face grew somber. He looked at me. "On the road to Montepulciano. Last night. The road to Montepulciano. The crossroads with the crucifix. The steep hill." My blood ran cold. I didn't tell Sarah until we were back at the villa, preparing for the very dinner the bartender had recommended. Her hands shook as she applied her lipstick. "So we were right," she whispered. "We keep our mouths shut," I reiterated, the decision feeling heavier now. "We enjoy our dinner. We act normal." The trattoria was everything we'd hoped for. Low, wood-beamed ceilings, checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic and roasting meat. The food was sublime. Tom ate pasta with a gusto we'd never seen at home. For a few hours, we lost ourselves in the joy of it. When we were done, pleasantly full, I caught the waiter's eye and asked for the bill. "Il conto, per favor." The waiter nodded and disappeared. He returned a minute later, not with a bill, but with the owner, a stout, smiling man in an apron. The owner beamed at us. "Your meal," he said in heavily accented, carefully practiced English. "It is paid for." We were stunned. "Paid for? By whom?" I asked. The owner and waiter exchanged a glance. The owner's smile became slightly fixed, a professional mask. "A misunderstanding. It has been settled. The meal is a gift." He would not elaborate further, despite our polite protests. We left a large cash tip on the table, feeling bewildered and uneasy. It happened again the next night when we returned, unable to resist the food. Again, the bill was taken care of. "The misunderstanding," the waiter said with a shrug, as if it were a regular occurrence. By the third time, we understood. This was no random act of generosity from a fellow tourist. This was restitution, an apology written in pasta and wine. The mafia, or the local clan we had interrupted, was paying for our meals. It was a message as clear as it was chilling. We are sorry we almost killed you. Enjoy the food. Do not speak of this. We tried to eat at other restaurants in neighboring towns, but the guilt of potentially harming the Trotteria's owners, what if they were being forced to comp our meals and eat the cost, drove us back. And each time, they seemed genuinely happy to see us. The waiter brought Tom complimentary gelato without us asking, earning him a friend for life. We never saw the two armed men again, but we felt their presence, or the presence of the organization they represented, in the strange bubble of hospitality that surrounded us at that one restaurant. Our holiday was incredible. The villa, the scenery, the food, but it was underscored by a constant, low-frequency hum of tension, the knowledge that we were guests in a beautiful landscape with hidden, dangerous rules. The following year, we went back to Italy. We chose the Cinque Terre on the coast. We paid for every single meal ourselves. The food was delicious, the views spectacular, and it was, without a shadow of a doubt, the most relaxing vacation I have ever had. The two stories, the girl on the highway and the men on the hill, are bookends of a personal philosophy forged in fear. One taught me that evil often wears an ordinary face and can step out of the darkness onto any road. The other taught me that sometimes, survival means accepting a sinister apology written in the universal language of a free meal and walking quietly away. Both lessons linger, reminders that the world holds pockets of profound darkness, and the most terrifying trips are not always the ones to unfamiliar places, but the journeys into the hidden capacities of ordinary men, met in the night when you're just trying to get home. If these stories of close calls on the road got your heart pounding, show some love. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to Winds of Thought for more tales that take you to the edge.